Eurasian communists, they're on our tail, but we won't let them make our freedom fail. Soviet boomers trying to bring us down, but we'll never let them steal our crown. Satanic neo-Nazis spreading their hate. We won't let darkness determine our fate. Pagan feminists, they're out for control, but we stand strong, united as a whole. In this sitcom world, we'll make our stand. United we stand against Gnostic cults, the Chicom shills, social justice be damned. We do it for free, alternative reality, best timeline. Got Emperor Trump versus Chaos Walrus Wizards, James Lindsay, Alexander Dugan mechanics. Get the bullet too in Minecraft and Warzone 3. Minecraft and Warzone 3.
There it is. Alrighty. Alrighty, we're all good. See if everyone's here. Give me one little second. There we go. There I am. I'm funny. I'm sneaky like a rogue. And I'm hungry like a wolf, apparently. So, let's see what we got here for us. Let's let a few people join in, especially since this is kind of a story time with Dashin. Because, every so often, like, I encounter something on, let's say, the internet, or YouTube recommends me something because the algorithm gods are fickle in some regard. And this just so happened to be something that I thought would be worthy of making content on. I don't know why this is a thing. I really don't know why shit like, well, I'll just show you for a second. There we go. Now this channel I encountered just recently. We're gonna get into this one in particular, but what I wanted to show was this particular podcast. I don't know where the hell why this is even out there. So let's see. Welcome to the Everyday Spy podcast, where Andrew Bustamane and Jihi Bustamane, a married pair of former CIA intelligence officers. Oh yes. Oh yes. Oh yes. Because, Operation Security is since a fucking thing, isn't it? Running a business, growing a family, and doing the life the best we can. Our goal with Everyday Spy Podcast is to teach you the same awesome spy skills we learned in the CIA and to live life on our own terms. We train you how to use social hacks, independent thinking, personal influence to achieve impossible goals. Now we use the same skills to take control of our environment and use that street cred from the CIA niggas to fucking make some profit and some platties, Get some platties up at this motherfucker. So this is the one that I found was interesting. America's hidden agenda in Ukraine. Now, the real question here is how much of this is actually stuff they believe, and how much of this shit is actually something that well, let me just say this. Like, the way it looks, you're going to love this. It's like, well, We'll just play it for you.
Russia didn't invade Ukraine just to be an oppressor. They didn't invade Ukraine to dominate the world. That's not what Russia's thinking. Russia is thinking economically. The whole recent summit between Russia and the African Union, which in a way wasn't really much of a summit. I don't think people like to talk about the economic benefit for the United States sending trillions of dollars into Ukraine. People don't want to talk about the fact that there's an economic benefit to the United States in doing so.
Oh yeah, we got to protect our assets, you know. And in a lot of ways, this is something that I never really thought about. I mean, with all the war going on in Russia and Ukraine, right? We forgot about who's the breadbasket of the world, Ukraine, right? So if they could control the world food supply, they could weaponize a bunch of horde of African farmers and shit. And we've already seen, for instance, not African farmers, what the hell is it? A bunch of starving Africans, like Somalis, like Elon Omar's type of people, let's say. And you could weaponize them and set them to fight for you. I mean, you've already seen that shit happen with the fucking Russians, weaponizing PMCs from Africa. So this will be interesting how they play it. And they actually have some timestamps. So if we want to, like, speed run this shit, we could actually do it. So that's kind of cool. I would sub, but this is...
So yesterday we went...
I would sub personally, and I would recommend people look into this, because this is just very interesting, that these guys actually... What does it say on our shirt? Everyday Spa. She just made that shit up. It's like fucking Eyewitness or something like that from school. And it's... Oh, wow, we got ourselves snake dancers, got ourselves a lot of interesting crap that you put in the background. We all know that this type of shit is designed specifically to command the look, because these are the type of people who will literally wear a chicken hat to an interview, begging the question, begging you to answer why the fuck you dress as a chicken. They'll do that.
To a new ice cream place. We were on a different side of town, and we wanted to treat the kids to some ice cream. And what I thought was really interesting when we went there was we always ask for a much smaller scoop for the kids. The kids always get it on a cone. So we're always like, you know, just whoever's scooping it, we're like, you know, I know it's a single scoop, but just can you put like half of it on there, like half the size? And sometimes people will look at us funny, and sometimes they'll be like, yeah, sure, whatever you want.
What the fuck is with the fucking the Glowies and ice cream? What the hell do we get ice cream?
But this guy, it was a small shop.
Yeah.
It was the owner. This guy looked at us, and he had already done this giant one scoop for our 6-year-old.
I remember that.
Biden.
And he just looks at
Or
us.
Brandon
and he's
Jr.
like, you pay the same amount of money. And I was like, I know. I was like, I am happy to pay you the same amount of money. She just doesn't need all that sugar.
We don't need.
Yeah, we
all that
don't
sugar.
need her to have all that sugar.
We are actually paying you
Yes.
to not give her a
That-
sugar rush.
Yes.
That's the service.
Right. And so even after that, so he looked at us kind of funny and pushed back a little bit, and then he put it back in, and then he went to do another scoop, and it was still like 3/4 of the first, you know, the size of the first scoop. And I was like, okay, like I'm not going to keep pushing back on this guy. But I thought it was...
You know, at this point, I really do think ice cream is just the softest talking point. I mean, I decided to pull out my Jerry Garcia Ben & Jerry's ice cream. They're talking about ice cream, right? Plus, it's hot as hell here. Like 118 degrees, so, you know, figured, whatever. So, you get an idea of what they're talking about. Let's speed run this a bit. Let's see, portioned, price, and size. Okay, here we go. The speaker discusses the experience they had with ice cream. Oh yeah, this is all AI generated, by the way. Probably it is, because they actually have stuff that would do this stuff. More element of margin, price, speaker respects the perspective of money changes, experiences, conversation. Okay, here we go. 13 minutes in. We'll speed running this
Those are
crap.
two things that are the downfall for all great people.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because we went to the school of Monopoly.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, outside of fighting for Boardwalk and Park Place,
Yeah.
I don't really understand anything else about the game Monopoly.
Mm-hmm.
Paying rent on pieces that you land on. Like, we went to board game school of economics,
Yeah.
which is not how the world works. The world doesn't
Right.
work like Monopoly.
No.
Well, you know, don't tell the CIA that. They literally, in some cases, and I might clip it in here later on, a instance where they actually do have the CIA. Actually, I'll pull it up at some point later on in the podcast. But they actually did have like a a CIA asset go into like TSR and Games Workshop and whatnot. Not Game Workshop. What was it? It was either TSR and Wizards of the Coast, basically talking about how we could use role-play games to train spies. So I wouldn't be surprised if he did train on Monopoly.
Where you roll a dice, you take your turn, you wait for the next person's turn, and there's a chance card that tells you whether or not you're going to jail,
Yeah,
right? But economics really does rule the world,
absolutely.
just not like it did in Monopoly.
Yeah, I think that's the concept that I've, an adult, come to accept more and more, that everything is about trade. Everything is economics.
What's up, Holy
Every
Mystic? What's up,
relationship
Vinny?
is a transaction. I mean, from a personal relationship between a husband and wife, a mother and child, country to country, it's all about transactions, which is economics, which is trade.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of economics and trade news happening around us all the time that isn't couched as economics and trade.
Right.
It's
This is actually true. A lot of the search engines are really just pitch engines, but the question then becomes, for who though? The company I work at, they told me about a specific search engine that is designed specifically to like analyze stocks and analyze bonds and analyze information and shit like that like would be used for investment. So there are different types of classifications of searches that exist. It's not like the 1990s where it's the Wild West and you can just go anywhere, and if you could connect to the site, you could connect to it and you're on your own. There are actual pitch engines now, like Google and, DuckDuckGo, and even the deep web crap has its own pitch engines.
couched as something else. It's couched as hegemony. It's couched as conflict. It's couched as oppression.
Right, right. Do you have examples, like current examples that
And I think one of the examples where we're seeing that conversation, that economics conversation that's being couched as something it isn't, is with the war in Ukraine. Russia didn't invade Ukraine just to be an oppressor.
Well, yeah, no one has said that. They're not doing it just because, haha, evil, stereotypical, Soviet or Hollywood Soviet, right? Which is always significantly played by a Swedish person for some reason. I don't know why. Just the Swedes oftentimes play better Soviets than the fucking Russians do.
They didn't invade Ukraine to dominate the world because the whole world lies just beyond the borders of Ukraine. That's not what Russia's thinking. Russia is thinking economically. They're thinking pragmatically. They're thinking about resources,
yeah,
trade, and the future of resources and trade as it relates to Russia and keeping the Russian government stable and afloat.
right, yeah,
Emphasis on the Russian government. These are the same type of people. Like, say what you will about inflation right now. The Russians are going through 30% inflation. We're going for about 10% or so, and it's recovering. So for all the suffering we're going through, they are suffering far worse than we ever could. Because, like I think it was the Family Guy skit said, I have everything you have except it's shittier.
I mean, I think anytime war breaks out, I think people might liken it to a game of Risk, right? World domination, and how do you
Board game culture.
right?
Board game kids.
Oh, you guys are board game geeks over here.
Well, whoever controls the Eurasian landmass wins. Don't you know? That's what happens. You take over Asia, and then you take over fucking what is it? What the hell is it? You take over Asia, and then you take over Europe, and then you basically control the game after that. But it's very hard to control Asia because it has a lot of points, if I believe.
So, I think a lot of people might think, the game of Risk and war strategy and where do you put your military and whatever, but really, I think life is a lot more like the game of Catan, Settlers of Catan, where it's really about resources and trade and who owns the roads and
Who's got the biggest military?
yeah,
Libertarians fucking on suicide watch, I guess.
And relationships towards building to the next kind of stage of evolution,
right,
of civilization.
yeah,
That's really interesting. And it's funny, especially when you look at the history of UN resolutions
yeah,
relating to Ukraine, you actually start to see this because the very first set of UN resolutions that went out in 2000, what was that?
14.
22? Yeah, 22. The vote was hugely against, like it was a vote where the vast majority was condemning Russia.
Yeah.
There were a number of abstentions, and there were a number of people who voted against the resolution, but the vast majority of countries voted to condemn Russia.
Yeah.
And then over the course of the next year and a half, we've had, what, 5 more resolutions, all passed by a majority, but each resolution has a smaller and smaller majority.
Yeah.
More countries are abstaining or voting no against the resolution,
Yeah.
which is fascinating, because what that means is as the Russian invasion has continued, arguably support for Russia has increased in the UN.
Now, why would that be, right? Why would that be? It makes sense. It kind of no. It makes sense in a lot of ways. Like, I always was wondering, why the hell is Walrus Boy hanging out with Kimi Saba, I believe his name is. Let's see if I'll get a picture of it here real quick. Kimi Saba, Dugong, Walrus Man, and the KGB. I don't know. He's technically Gru, but we don't. But they're all the same to me. They all glow in the dark here. Let's see. All right. There he is. Here we go. This fucker right here. This guy right here, right? So you have shit like this media right here. Russia elections, Master in Chief, how Russia interfered with the elections of 20 countries. And keep in mind, Petrosian, he's been seen supposedly seen in Africa, right? The same guy who's basically egging these guys on, right? They're egging on and basically taking away the food supply of the Russians. Or not the Russians, the Africans. They're basically weaponizing the third world. So, yeah. The Pan-African Project even talks about this on our Islamicist, which basically talks about how they will weaponize Islam. The Russians will, by the way. The African Union, they're talking about the same thing. And, of course, everyone's favorite glow-in-the-dark walrus and his fucking loyal the wise Negro, let's say. Let's keep going.
Through abstentions and people voting against the resolutions. What are your thoughts?
And you can't really say it's support for Russia that's increased. It's support for
multipolar world.
I wouldn't say it's support for Russia. It's the realization that Russia has an impact on various countries.
That's a very fair point.
Like the Russia-Africa summit that just happened, Africa's not affected by the war in Ukraine until trade is affected.
Right. Until
And then
grain is affected.
Yeah, and suddenly they feel the pain of the war.
Right.
And it matters to them.
Yeah,
right?
because who's gonna feed all the poor starving African children if not the Americans? Who right? Because someone's got to feed them, right? Or there's gonna be mass starvation, and then we're gonna get a bunch of fucking Time magazine ads on TV, or God forbid if you don't block them online, right?
I mean, the same thing, I believe, happened to us in World War II when we didn't really want to get involved. But then they started bombing the ships. Trade started being impacted.
And then Pearl Harbor happened.
And then Pearl Harbor happened, right? I mean, but arguably, our interest was piqued when our trade was hit.
When our economics were
Right, when
impacted.
our economics were impacted, exactly.
That's super interesting. And you're right. The whole recent summit between Russia and the African Union, which in a way wasn't really much of a summit. Did you read about the peace plan? There was a peace plan that these 7 or 10 or 12?
I think it was 17, but previous year had been
43?
like 46 or something.
Yeah, so these 17 African leaders proposed a peace plan. And it's couched as a peace plan in the media, right? Africa submits peace plan, and Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs responds that they're taking the peace plan into consideration. Did you read what it was?
No, I couldn't find an actual readout of the plan.
Because it wasn't a plan.
Oh.
Apparently it was
I was looking.
these African leaders just kind of sat down at dinner and had a conversation with the head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Russia. And they're like, we really think that peace would be a good idea. what do you think, Comoros? And what do you think, Niger? And what do you think, Solomon Islands? And they're all like, oh, yeah, we think that peace would be a really good idea for you guys between Ukraine and Russia. Peace would be good.
Yeah.
And they went to St. Petersburg for this conference. It was the first stop after Kiev. So they had just left Ukraine, where they probably had the exact same conversation with Zelensky.
Well, and of course, what's interesting is, and the Putin playing.
By the way, this is 10 months old. I want to point that out. But again, I find it very interesting. I might want to try to get a hold of these fuckers at some point and basically lay it on them straight and say, look, you fuckers, this is how this works.
His, diplomatic game that he does, he's of course like, thank you so much for your concern and your ideas, and I'm really going to take these seriously, but you also need to talk to the other guys because really it's their fault. Like,
It was just a military exercise, guy. We were trying to fight those evil Nazis, don't you know? We were trying to liberate Ukraine from those neo-Nazi fascist Satanists who conveniently, dress very similarly to the guy who wrote the whole plan of economic domination. But hey, who cares, right? Who cares?
Everybody's getting at the same thing. Everybody just wants dialogue so trade can open back up.
That's exactly
right?
it. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Everybody, the whole world, just wants things to go back to some semblance of normal. Not pre-February 2022 normal. That's never going to happen. But some sort of normal where trade can then pick up again, where economies can start growing again.
Yeah, like the Eurasian economy.
After COVID, then after the incredible amount of sanctions that the West put on Russia, and let's be honest, not everybody in the West agreed with those sanctions.
Right.
You've had Germany speak out against them. You've had France speak out against them. You've had Poland try to get more, right? You've had Hungary push back.
Based Poland.
It's not, the entire European Union is not on board with this. They're not all in lockstep. And now here we are a year and a half later, everybody's feeling it, right?
Yeah.
Russian and German trade is very closely intertwined.
Yeah.
Yep.
So is French and Russian trade.
Yep.
And then, of course, all of your third world countries, your third world Asia, your third world Africa, heavily, heavily dependent on trade and production out of Russia. Another great example here, I think, that absolutely goes without people talking about it is India. India is one of those countries that has abstained from every UN resolution, right? So they have not condemned Russia. They are also one of the primary countries that continue to buy Russian oil, even though it's been sanctioned. They're the ones that have floated the ruble, so it's back up to stronger value than it ever was before 2022.
Fucking Pajit.
So you got India, you got China, you got these other strong, wealthy countries who are seeing the importance of economic trade, seeing the economics of this conflict, and benefiting from it, even though they are also in this geopolitical game of reputation with the United States. I feel like, if anything, what it shows that countries, now more than ever, are putting their own best interests ahead of political influence from the United States.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the CIA, we always used to say there are no friends. There are only allies. And I
Jesus Christ, a woman after my own heart. Holy hell.
think that in America and probably a lot of Western countries, I think that gets muddied, right? I think we think of, European countries as not just our friends, but I really do think or not just our allies, but I think we think of them as friends, where China and India are great examples of not friends, allies.
Shared interests.
Shared interests, exactly. They don't have to
Mutual gain.
like the other country's politics. They don't have to like. I mean, India and China have had territorial disputes, but they know that if they can tamp those down or put them aside just a little bit, there's lots of benefits for them in becoming allies on certain issues.
When the adults are in charge, the children can have their little skirmishes, and then everyone goes back to square one the next day,
Right? And that's how countries really move forward.
That's true, and I think that's why we saw Russia, China, and India all form the BRICS.
Yeah.
Right? And that trade bloc has been around for a long time and has been growing in total GDP.
Yeah.
in comparison to the G7 countries, which have actually been declining in overall GDP. It's a fascinating point because it's all based on economics. It's all Settlers of Catan,
Yeah.
not Monopoly.
Yeah.
It's not. It's neither. It's actually more like Age of Empires, or in this case, Sid Meier's Civilizations.
Yeah.
Or
it's
Sid
really
Meier's, I
countries
should say,
looking at each other of
Civilizations.
how can I get a leg up for my own country? Not how can I make you look more like me so we're kindred spirits and brothers in democracy. Like that's not how those countries think.
Yeah, and
I
it's
think,
so when I consider the grain deal specifically that continues to be off and on with
it's a bargaining
with
chip
Ukraine
for him.
exactly.
I mean, Putin knows. I mean, by virtue of the fact that he
What? Well, before she continues, I want to say this. It actually kind of clicked with me. I'm like, he's a Soviet boomer. Starvation is a weapon he can weaponize against his people. Because I'll tell you this: when you see someone eating and you're hungry, you'll basically kiss ass. You'll eat ass in some cases, literally in some regards. Fucking long pig.
that he held to the deal for, I believe it was a year,
Like you said,
and the agreement was for only a year. I am certain that he walked into that knowing that let me give you a taste of what it's like to have the ports open. So then when I shut them down, I have this large bargaining chip now. Now everybody's at my doorstep
yeah,
asking me to please reopen,
yeah,
right? And now it's in my court what I do with this.
And it's really interesting because even when you look at the response that's coming from the UN, they're condemning Russian behavior, but they can't refute the fact that if Russia supplies the required grain to keep Africa from a food crisis,
Yeah.
like the UN is saying Russia has the amount of grain required and Russia has the logistical supply chains required, like they really can do it on their own.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating because what Putin did a year ago was accept the grain deal, and by accepting the grain deal, he cut off any investment in creating an alternative to Russia's supply of grain.
They're like, Russia's going to play nice now.
Yeah, so we're
It's kind of like what happens with when we basically gave a bunch of clothing and shoes and like used equipment and stuff like that. It decimated the economies of Africa. Like honestly, Africa needs to be sanctioned. They need to have tariffs, like a lot of fucking tariffs and crap. Hey, Mike, how you doing? We're watching these CIA Glowies. They actually are former CIA, by the way. So I found it very interesting that these guys legitimately are talking about the economic angle. And by the way, I'm going to subscribe to these guys. I'm subbing to these guys because I think I could probably get them on my show. I just want to kick. I just want on kick. I was just on kick. Oh, dude, awesome. I don't live stream enough there. Like I really don't. So oftentimes, because I'm incredibly lazy. I am incredibly freaking lazy. Like even now, I have this Ben and Jerry's that I have, and I'm just too lazy to go clean a freaking spoon. And plus, it's getting a little bit soft. So I'll put it. It's just the way I like it. Because they were talking about ice cream earlier. I don't know what it is about feds and ice cream.
going to go ahead and keep continuing to
Yeah.
use the port out of
Yeah.
Odessa, right? And then when he shut it down, now all of a sudden he had a whole year to build up reserves,
Yeah.
boost agriculture, everything else, knowing full well he could shut down the ports by rejecting the grain deal.
Zenid.
and then
I've never
supply
seen him.
Africa
I'll
on
look
his
that
own.
up.
Yeah.
And now he has 17 leaders going through St. Petersburg
Yeah.
to shake his hand and say thank you and support him in the UN.
Yeah, and he doesn't, part of the complaint is that what he's promised so far does not match what was being provided previously, but he doesn't have to.
Right.
Like you said, all he has to do is meet bare minimum requirements for what they need. He doesn't have to, he just has to keep things from falling apart around him long enough for him to make his next step.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's really interesting because there's so much that ties, as ridiculous as it sounds, to say it out of my mouth. There's so much similarity between what's happening right now between Russia and Ukraine and what's happening in the neighborhood ice cream parlor.
God, why are we? What is ice cream code word for something? What the? Like seriously, between Biden and these CIA fuckers, they literally glow in the dark, guys. You can see them if you're driving. Now I can't say run them over, but I could definitely tell you send them to Al Simmons. Send them to Al Simmons' way.
right? Because it really
Yeah.
is all about, does the service give you what you want? And if it does, will you pay the price?
Yeah. Yeah.
And to these African countries that want grain, they know they can't get it from Ukraine, so
Yeah.
they get it from Russia. And then they pay the price, right? They go on their tour through St. Petersburg and they shake hands and they get their pictures
Yeah.
with Putin, and they're going to continue being able to supply food to keep themselves from a food crisis.
And they also get their shake at the Russian chicks. No, like legitimately, there are instances like the alt-right sphere of like the white nationalists or whatever the fuck you want to call them, the alternative right, the ethno-nationalists, whatever. They are not talking about any of this, Russia's pro-white, pro-right. They literally are having a lot of their daughters like basically being whored off to some of these war fighters from the African countries. Like legitimately, it is happening, but no one will bring that up because Russia is playing they're not playing Settlers of Catan. They think that's the game. That's a two-dimensional worldview. You gotta look at this from a multi-dimensional worldview because it's inconvenient for them. Oh, it is inconvenient because they were talking about board games because everyone talks about board games, and not to mention, and I actually pull it up here for a second. See if I have it here. CIA data. Let me see if I can find it. They keep talking about board games. CA RPG role play games. Here we go. This was something that was interesting. Okay. This is from Ars Technica. I'm gonna post this in the chat here or online. Okay, the CIA uses board games to train officers, and I got to play them. Why the CIA embraces training game cheaters where their El Chapo hit a fire alarm. So this is basically what they do. All the skills that they would need to be an asset in the field could very well be used, but just by LARPing as a D&D rogue. And this is why I say I truly do believe I could take some of these guys. I don't have the logistics, but we're all on the same freaking team here. Because even though she looks like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, with a liquor license, not to try and insult people, it's just who I am. And he looks like an extra on Sesame Street. Doesn't mean that they necessarily they're not capable. You never underestimate somebody. That's what I guess I'm trying to say. Mike also says everyone on the alt-right thinks they're Littlefinger or some armchair realist. Yeah, they have a gamma male mentality.
Right, because they have their own people that they have to think about regardless.
And the U.S. isn't necessarily scot-free in all this because we also have economic-based incentives.
Yeah.
We make our decisions based on economics. There is an economic benefit to us supporting Ukraine.
Well, in that very same rationale, what he just said, the angle he is looking from makes a lot of sense why we supported Africa, right? Why did we support Africa? Well, why is China supporting Africa? Why is Africa even important, right? Say what you will about the white nationalists and whatnot. I keep going back to the white nationalists, but this is kind of my point because they only see color, but this is an example of why it would be beneficial to purchase the loyalty of the African countries, at least on the UN, so we can save face at the UN and don't have a breakdown of the institutions on the global level like we do at the League of Nations. It does make sense what they're saying. So again, like I said, I'm gonna sub to these guys because these guys are giving me angles and shit that I've never even looked at before. Plus, I think I could learn a thing or two if we play games together. We have so much in common.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think people like to talk about that. I don't think people like to talk about the economic benefit for the United States sending old munitions into Ukraine, sending flawed anti-personnel mines into Ukraine, sending trillions of dollars into Ukraine. People don't want to talk about the fact that there's an economic benefit to the United States in doing so. Because one day, whoever wins,
Yeah.
Ukraine will need to be rebuilt.
Yeah.
And the United States is going to have a large line of credit for whoever wants to rebuild it.
Yep, they will. And at the same time, let's not kid ourselves. I've had a few people on my who send me information regarding like a bunch of like a huge, I want to say a field of like Ukrainian flags of the fallen, right? They're burying the fallen. And my first thought here was how many of these are actually the old people who are actually on the front lines fighting, and how many of them are like volunteer, and how many of them are just like repeat shots at a different angle. Let's say you got to be very careful what you see. OSINT etiquette is very important, I'd say.
If Ukraine wins, the United States is going to be the first person to be offered, joint capital, joint property, all sorts of incentives to come and rebuild, right? If Russia ends up winning it, they're going to have zero capital to actually rebuild the infrastructure that's there, and they're going to turn to some sort of World Bank that's in collusion with the United States. It's a net win for the United States one way or the other. So you know that I've been on the History Channel television show, the new show that they launched called Beyond Skinwalker. And I found myself in this position now where, our business is growing, and that show, the new show that we did with A&E and History Channel, is breaking records.
Yeah.
But I find myself having to choose, I feel like I have to choose between the two, because it's so time consuming to shoot a television show.
It is.
And it's so time consuming to build and run a business. And I'm not sure if this is the right or the wrong decision, but as I try to choose which direction to go, I find myself seeking counsel from the kids.
That's always the right direction.
Oh, that is such a LSD guru direction to go, and you fucking know it. Let's listen to what the kids have to say. Hell, let's let the dog decide. Yeah, because of its isolationists got their because of the isolationists got their way, our military would be behind and let our stuff rot and let our stuff rot. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of these, again, I'm a nationalist. I'm not an isolationist. I could tell you why I want to go to the Ukraine. I could tell you why I think we should be in the Ukraine. And I can make a very good argument for why we should support Israel. I could make a good argument for why, they made a good argument specifically why we should support the Africans. We're basically buying them off at the UN for the food. And let's not kid ourselves. We're not starving. It makes sense. It makes sense why they're doing it. I think, again, I'm going to sub to these guys because I want to learn iron sharpens iron.
Always, 100%. They have the best insights.
So I've asked the kids if it's cool to see me on TV. And what's funny is that they actually think it's cooler to see me on YouTube than to see me on History Channel.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Which is hilarious to me,
Yeah.
right? Because that's not how we grew up. There was no YouTube when we grew up.
Yeah.
The History Channel was the bomb when you and I were 10 years old.
Yeah.
And now apparently it's just another channel on YouTube.
No, it's Storage Wars, and I think it's not Storage Wars, was it? What is it? Pawn Stars, and I think a bunch of Ancient Aliens and crap like that. It really went downhill, but when they were young, back in the early 2000s, before Pawn Stars, it was actually really good. But even then, they started realizing, what the hell is it? They started realizing that I'm just trying to think of off the top of my head. They started realizing that it was easier to shield the paranormal, and that's when Eric Von Daniken killed the History Channel. Mike Tuck says, American isolationism is outdated for a time when Britain was a global empire while we sat there building our stuff. Exactly. And even then, I've said before, we didn't really revolt. We seceded. We were secessionists. We weren't revolutionaries. Because we didn't inherit their empire. We later inherited their empire after we did the work and put in the effort, right? But in the end, we didn't have a violent revolution like France did.
But I want to know, what are your thoughts seeing me on TV? Is it cool? Is it indifferent? Are you used to it? I mean, I was gone for 90 days almost filming that show.
I know. That was rough. But when I watch the show, the post-edit on the show is so good. And learning the behind the scenes of how the show is made has made me appreciate other shows that I really like even more.
Let's speedrun this shit again. They discussed their History Channel. And that's pretty much it regarding Okay, so the speaker reflects on the fascination with dinosaurs and how they serve as a reminder of past mass extinctions and possibly future ones. Recap by Tammy AI. Okay, so it was by AI then. So besides that, and again, I just wanted to get to the juicier stuff with these guys because they're apparently they literally are Glowies or ex-Glowies. Are you aware of John Collins' pro-Russian talking points? Yes, I am. Even John Collins of Rochdale? Yes. Yes, I am aware that I'm aware of him. I only ask that. How do you know about Brother John? That's what he likes to be called, by the way. And it also should be noted that a lot of it is, but at the same time, like, here's the thing about Brother John: he doesn't have much. He has influence, but not money. I have money. I don't have influence. You know. So, you know, and even then, didn't George Galloway lose? Right? I'm subscribed. Yeah, same here. I'm still subscribed to John. It's just I don't see eye to eye with him on this. But again, the one thing I would say about the CIA is they love to keep. They're like the 7-Eleven. They're not always doing business, but they're always open, and they understand the benefits of keeping the lines of communication open. It's like that scene in The Sum of All Fears, the very end, where the guy who played the Nazis in Raiders of the Lost Ark. See, I'll just play it for you. There we go. This is the idea behind it. And it's funny enough that it, I don't know. I feel as though the older I get, the more likely I'm going to run into shit like this. Yeah, this guy.
Hot rooms turn icy cold.
No, they don't. Even if we tried hard. Yeah, look, you made a freaking swamp cooler.
Mr. Grushka. It is a lovely day.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. This is
Dr. Muller. How do you do?
Crowd.
Nice to meet you.
Why am I not surprised? You know her name.
Our friend William thought I was a spy. Of course, he could never prove it.
He never told me you were friends.
Perhaps he didn't know you well enough.
Or perhaps it's just afraid of the turn of his phrase. Who knows?
Cabot did tell me he had a source in Russia.
To keep the back channels open.
In hopes of staving off disaster.
Exactly. To keep the back channels open in hopes of keeping off the disaster. That's how the CIA would do it. They would never ever, unless they were going to kill you and drop you like a hot potato, these people have that ability, you know? They could do that if they wanted to. So let's see. Middle East strategy. The key to peace in Middle East. Redestabilizing the Middle East explained. Bet you, not Netanyahu bombs Rafah emergency. Oh, okay. Let's look at what an emergency podcast is. CIA couple. Oh, they're literally the Mr. and Mrs. Smith, aren't they? Except they're not working for different agencies. Probably different departments. One was probably on top of the other in the hierarchy. But I don't know if they were at the actual 5th level of the CIA. The evolution of America was racist. Okay, let's see if this. Let's see. Phases of marriage, problem solving. Iran war, divorce, couples, election polls, Middle East crisis, who is right, busted, the year of the weird, let's see, how to win, let's see, Spy Kid, CIA spies raising children to hack life like a pro, who is Hamas, mind control hacks, Masterclass. Let's try this. Let's look at this one. Here we go.
How do you persuade others?
This is a really interesting question. So the first thing that jumps to my mind is that we were taught that persuasion and influence are not the same thing.
Influence is me being the pimp, and persuasion is me convincing you to go to work.
That influence is rational and persuasion is emotional. And that's immediately something that always jumps to my mind, right? You can persuasion is something that's driven through the emotional brain, through emotional response, whereas influence is something that's driven through the rational brain. So, for example,
So would we be targeting the neocortex as opposed to, let's say, the mammalian complex?
I if I'm a positive influence on a junior employee, then they adopt a rational, predictable behavior of being responsible and showing up on time and doing the right thing, right? I'm influencing them.
Right.
Influencing them to ask better questions, influencing them to think before they act, influencing them to make some sort of rational change. Persuasion is very different. Persuasion is emotional. You persuade someone to do something, and it's usually a short-term objective, right? Like when a lie persuaded me to spend more than $30 on Legos.
She also has this great persuasion face,
Yeah.
which I think is something where she like squishes her cheeks and like gives you a little pouty face, and
And it's very sweet.
Yeah.
And it makes me, yeah.
it does. It works on you every time.
Because
somehow.
it reminds me of when she was like 6 days old and she was all bundled up and she just looks at you and it's just like, yeah. I might as well just write a new check. But that's persuasion, right?
Right.
Because persuasion is emotional. Because I'm taken back to her being 6 days old. I'm taken back to the feelings, the overflowing like joy and pride and relief of a new baby that's alive and healthy. And like that's persuasion. Persuasion is emotional. When you, and I know that like luckily we were both kind of hussy-ish when we were younger. But like oftentimes when we're trying to get someone to go to bed with us, we use persuasion, right? We try to trigger emotions, whether that emotion is like lust or guilt or obligation or what.
Lust? You're trying to persuade someone to go to bed with lust? Okay. Okay, it's the spy that shagged me.
Whatever, right? We persuade, right? You had to persuade me.
Oh, really? Well, I thought it was just natural attraction. I guess not.
You
Fucking
weren't wearing natural attraction that day. You chose what you were
That's
wearing.
fair. That's fair. My outfit was persuasion.
so let's see what else we got here. So, apparently he actually is. He's been around the block. What does a CIA gangster like him? I kind of want to say it, but at the same time, I don't want to pick on him. I don't want to pick on the guy. That's not my intention. But at the same time, if it's a Walther PPK, is it a Walther PPK? I gotta
Andy
know.
Bustamante, welcome to the show, man.
Dude, I'm super stoked to be here. It's been awesome catching up before and off camera, so I'm really happy to do it now on camera.
Me too. So we're just gonna do a warm-up round, just a little bit about you for this segment. You are a former
CIA nigga, CIA Master Dick Masterson. Holy shit. Dick Masterson's the spy master. Holy shit. He's like Smiley. He's running the flying circus.
operative. You worked all over the world. Everyday carry is a big topic on this channel. It always has been. And so what I'm wanting to know is, what does the everyday spy carry on them every day?
Yeah, you know, when it comes to everyday carry, there's a lot of misconceptions about spies and EDC. Because a spy's job is to be covert. A spy's job is to blend in. So anything that we carry on us has to be something that blends in, that doesn't draw attention, and that withstands something that we call cover scrutiny.
Yeah, so if your legend is that you're a drug dealer, it makes more sense that a drug dealer has access to a firearm as opposed to a nun in a church, let's say. You know, unless you're just like Rowena Purr, we don't talk about Sister Edda because, you know, she'll probably tell us all about it.
Because if somebody stops us, if a police officer stops us, or if a child bumps into us, or if we get hit by a car and an ambulance comes to help us, we have to fit within our cover identity. So what we carry on us is a big part of what identifies your true affiliation, your true identity. So if you can imagine a spy getting hit by like a motorcycle in Vietnam, that's a normal occurrence. Like getting hit by traffic in Vietnam is pretty common. If an ambulance rolls up to you and you're carrying a Glock, or you're carrying a hidden knife, and especially if it's got some kind of seal on it that associates you with, you know, the U.S. government or U.S. military, all of a sudden you don't look like whatever your cover legend was. Business person, traveling tourist, whatever it might be.
It's funny he brings up the Vietnam angle because we did have like a SOG knife, I believe. There was like actual CIA knives that were given to MACV SOG during the Vietnam era. And what they actually forged the material in the knife in such a way that they could not trace it back to the West. They were like fucking paranoid about, black ops. So like they were using like World War One like Garans and crap like that, stuff that could be considered captured or stolen. Hence one of the reasons why I think this guy would probably agree with me that Biden did a good job. And I'm gonna say this for the record because people are gonna hate me or love me, it doesn't really matter. By the way, like, favorite, and subscribe. By the way, for this wonderful riveting commentary. But the reason I think Biden left all of our weapons, a whole military base full of weapons in Afghanistan, so they could end up on how shall we say it, end up on the world theater, so that way we could justify arming our people with modern weapons. I think it was a great move. I really do think it was a great move, honestly.
So our everyday carry is very, very different from that of the average person. So a couple things. One, we always wear shoes with laces. It sounds silly, but we always wear shoes with laces because you've got to always be ready to beat feet. Whether you're trying to run away or run towards something, laced shoes are far superior to sandals, to slip-ons, to anything else, right? We also always carry $100, US dollars. Depending on where we are in the world, most places in the world, $100 US gets you pretty much anywhere you need to go.
Really?
$100 US gets you pretty much anywhere you need to go in 80% of the world.
I think I'm gonna fucking do the same thing. That actually is wisdom to live by. I think I might learn a thing or two from these fuckers. Fucking Solomon Reed up in this motherfucker. I think our submarines are having a shotgun behind the door if Putin tried to do the funny thing. I think our submarine are having a shotgun behind the door. Honestly, all we have to do is nuke Moscow. Let's not kid ourselves. If we had to go do the shotgun behind the door thing, right? If Putin does like the funny monkey thing, he starts doing some monkey business. All we have to do is nuke Moscow, and everyone else will just say, "Yeah, we give in." Moscovites are shit. Because that's really what it is. It's the Moscovites, or the Moscovites, I should say. A lot of the evil in Russia is in Moscow, and maybe in St. Petersburg and whatnot.
You used that before.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, so I've gotten myself across rivers and across national borders in Southeast Asia because I had U.S. currency in $5 and $10 denominations. Just wave over a fishing vessel and be like, hey, I need to get to that side of the river. That side of the river is the difference between being in Thailand or being in Burma sometimes. Mm-hmm. And they don't really care. They don't, to have a $5 US bill, that's the equivalent of 150 Thai currency and that's
Fuck, he actually was in Roanapur. Holy hell.
150 pieces of Thai currency if it was Thai currency. The fact that it's a US dollar bill actually brings more value than if it was the currency of the local country, because now they have a US dollar, a US bill along with it, right? A minted US bill.
I would totally agree with that. What about first world countries?
First world countries gets a little bit trickier because in a first world country, your Germanys, your Polands, your Romanias, it's a little bit tough because they are built around the euro. Sometimes the euro has more value than the US dollar, but there's still an element of the fact that the US dollar has been the chief currency of the world. So they still are happy to take US dollars. They're still happy to take US currency, and they're also still happy to take cash for services. Because again, unlike the United States is a legalistic country. Like, as much as people complain about corruption and deceit and whatever else in the United States, it does not compare at all to what exists in Europe, right? Prostitution is legal in Germany. You can get basically anything you want in the Caucasus or even as far as Romania, and Romania is a NATO country. Mm-hmm. You can grease the skids anywhere, into any political office, into any business deal, into any manufacturing deal. With U.S. dollars, with currency, you can, whether you want to call it a bribe or whether you want to call it a service fee, whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of flexibility in certain morals that here in the United States we've legalized or we've legalistically constrained.
So I can remember V. Monroe, or Romanian V, right? He talked about how in Romania, of all places, in the olden days, what they do is they would get like medical, but then they would have to bribe the doctor to actually do the surgery, right? Or else you'd end up on Spirit Science saying, holy, socialism works. I've been cured, right? It's the same concept. And I do think that this guy, I think he's the real deal. That a lot of, wisdom is not a dump stat for the fucking spies. Wisdom is not a dump stat. For rogues it is, because because, the good die young, but pricks live forever.
So that's why $100 in U.S. currency is absolutely on my everyday carry list.
Interesting. I totally agree with you. I've done it as well, but in first world countries, $100 is, I've personally found to be a little bit harder to bribe with.
It's
So what I'm asking
country
is,
specific.
do you up the dollar amount when you're in first world countries?
Yes. So I'll move it up to more, like if I know that I'm going, specifically if I know I'm going to Europe, that number doubles. It becomes $200 US, right? And what really happens is it becomes 100 US and 100 in local currency.
Okay.
But they'll still be, and that's untouchable money. That's not the spending money. That's the money that gets stuck into like an extra crevice in the wallet. And then I actually put my ATM money on top of that. So your 60, 80, 70 euros, whatever it's going to be that you get through the day with. But your emergency, because EDC is about emergency, really.
Yeah.
It's about being there when you need it. So that 100 US and 100 local currency, or 200 local currency. Europe is good because euros are accepted everywhere for the most part. But it sucks. It sucks to get stuck in a European country where euros are not used as the main currency. And then they don't know whether the euro is real or not, but they do trust the US dollar. There's all sorts of stuff that gets sticky. In the United States, even in the United States, a first world country, 100 US dollars is actually quite effective. That's more than enough to get a cabbie to take you somewhere for cash. That's more than enough to get a driver to at least give you a ride somewhere. Like, you can do a lot. That's if you wave down somebody outside of a freaking Costco or a Walmart and you give them $100 in cash, dude, they'll take you pretty much anywhere.
Well, yeah, when pennies and you get nickel and dime, pull out Ben Franklin, and he'll fucking be your friend for an hour.
Yeah.
Right? Uber drivers drive 16 or 30 miles to get paid $16. Like, it's you never underestimate the value of cash. Plus, cash specifically is untraceable. Credit cards leave a trail. Venmo leaves a trail. There's digital pixie dust on everything, but cash is still something that you can use so that nobody can track it. So that makes you safe, but it also makes whoever helps you safe, because neither of you can be linked together and neither of you can be linked back to the transaction.
Speaking of currency, do you carry anything else with currency? Like, for an example, when I was working at the agency, I purchased a Rolex because Rolex is universal. Everybody knows what it is. It's always on you, and so it's real easy to, here you go.
Well, it's also, you want to look bitching when you're in your first person view with your freaking, operator fucking Rolex diver watch, whatever.
So what I'll actually do, the problem with material goods is that material goods, like a Rolex, require 2 steps before it can be liquidated. So you might give somebody a Rolex, but then they've got to actually go and pawn it, trade it, sell it, whatever else. And sometimes you need a favor that isn't a Rolex favor, right? So what I would actually recommend is instead use, especially if you're not in a covert capacity, get an international credit card, right? This is one of the things that I tell people all the time. Find yourself a Chase, a USA Bank, even an American Express, because you're going to pay $250 a year to have that American Express, but you could be anywhere in the world and run that thing through an ATM and have instant local currency. So now, if you need a $50 favor, you run the credit card, you got a $50 favor. You need a $500 favor, you run the credit card, you got a $500 favor. You need a $5,000 favor, you run the credit card, you got a $5,000 favor.
That actually makes sense. Like, this is some words, I don't know. We'll keep going. Let's see what else we got here. Deceit and manipulate. How to manipulate people like a spy. Let's try this.
And this is something CIA taught us too, that human beings need to feel connection. And I think it's important because what we were taught is that people need to feel connected. We were never taught that people actually need to connect. So a big
This is some rule lawyering shit right here. It's like, no wonder they wanted to freaking do board games. When they think like Magic the Gathering players, I can attack you, but I choose not to. In response to that, I will cast this.
part of what a case officer's job is to actually simulate the feeling of connection. And if you can control someone else's experience, if they can feel like they're connecting to you, even though you yourself are protecting yourself, separating yourself,
Right.
not actually connecting to the other person, that feels very genuine. And that feels very authentic and intimate and powerful.
And of course, they didn't do it. They didn't do it this time. They did not, unless they did. Let's see. I don't want to jump through the whole thing, but okay, here we go. It's been 3 weeks, long stretches, missing family, feeling lonely, social experiment. How do people feel? Okay, let's look at this.
But the social element of it is what's so fascinating to me. How is it, like a rhetorical question, but also one that I'd love for us to explore.
Yeah.
How do 16 people feel alone when they're all together all the time?
Yeah.
How can we feel so isolated when in fact we are inundated
Yeah.
with people?
Because you're not there to connect with each other. You're there to do a job, right? So it's not like you spend, 12 hours sitting around the campfire learning about each other's families and history, and connecting on the things that make you, human beings. I mean, you're working the whole time. I mean, it's a grind from what it sounds like, tons of work, different hours of the day. Sometimes you guys start at 6 a.m. Sometimes you guys start at 1 and then
We're gonna go to this one next here, exposing the. I fucking wish you would. I hope you would. I exposing. We're gonna just cue this sucker up right here. Puppet of the United States exposing the deep state's role in the White House. Oh boy. Oh Lord. Let's see. What makes today hard? Poor. Come on, no. Persuading object. Let's see. Who else has influence? How good are the Cubans? Government service professionals. Intelligence and anti-money. Will China influence the elections? Protecting yourself from influence. Let's look at this one right here.
Influence.
yeah. And I'm a personal fan of influence. I find it such a fascinating topic.
And influence is logical as opposed to persuasion, which is emotional.
Because you're twisted.
It's human psychology, and it's funny because it's human psychology. Everybody falls prey to influence. And that's one of the reasons that you and I are always talking about assessments and identifying the facts and looking at the data, because the only way to protect yourself from influence, from outside influence, is by doing those things, by going through those processes of knowing what somebody else is really talking about. Because
Auditing the ideas. It's very much like eating food, right? Like if you're gonna be, you don't have to be a total health nut, but you need to know first you have to know the ingredients of what's in your sausage, right? Because it's not no mystery meat. We're not eating no mystery meat here. Our data has to be, vetted. So we actually have to turn over, the package and see, oh, this has soy, we're throwing it out. Oh, but it's soy, but it's actually fermented, so it's okay. Same thing with information. So that's something that I would agree with them on in that regard.
influence is so powerful because it's so emotional generally, and it's so easy to just go with it because you feel it. It feels right. So it's so interesting to me how masses of people can be swayed, because they don't take the time to protect themselves. They don't take the time to seek the truth.
You're talking about how people can protect themselves. I'm pretty sure we had a question about something similar, right?
Oh, yes. So interestingly enough,
What's with her eyes, dude? She's like a fucking guppy.
in this festive time of year, we've gotten like 4 or 5 questions in a row where people were asking about how do you deal with hostile people who are condescending, people who insult you, people who intimidate you. And I just thought it was so fascinating that, we're in December, multiple
Ghoul Cyrix, yeah. Ghouls. Ghoul Cyrix. The lolcow eyes. I actually think she looks like Sid the Sloth. Sid the CIA Sloth.
faiths have celebrations this month. And those are the questions that are coming through. So yeah.
I think that makes perfect sense. I think that makes perfect sense because let's be honest about this festive season. And let's be honest about the holidays, right?
Yeah.
Hallmark makes us all really excited for the holidays.
Yeah.
But we all know that also means we have to be with our families, not like our kids and our spouse, mothers-in-laws and mothers and fathers-in-laws and fathers and cousins-in-laws and and people who are unfortunately related to us through these things right here. That related to us.
I'm wondering if that's like I'm wondering, did this may just maybe being a bit overtly paranoid because we're dealing with two Glowies, but one of the things I gotta ask, is that like issued? Is that standard issue from like City Hall when it comes to the ring? Because I remember when I was in City Hall to get my birth certificate, right, from the county records before I moved out of the home state, right? I had to get I had to go down to the public records office and get it, right? But one of the things I saw was, I guess it was a couple of sorts. They were trying to get their wedding vows annulled or whatever it was, and they had like I think it was like a $50 ring that would come with it. It was like a steel ring or what have you, just so they could say, here you go, you're now man and wife. Here's the ring for it's even official, right? I'm wondering if it's one of those instances, if they're like marriages of convenience or marriages of allies,
Through these things right here. That's where hostility and condescension and criticism and all that awkwardness comes from. And how do you deal with that? I can absolutely understand why people are asking those questions right now. Those are great questions to ask right now.
Well, and what's funny is there were a couple of questions that were very clearly about what people felt like were hostile work environments. But I guess if you're looking at the end of year and you're like waiting for a bonus or you're preparing to take time off,
Hostile
I can
work
see how
environments.
that would apply in the same vein, right? Where maybe your work environment is a little bit hostile right now. Everybody's under stress. Maybe you're not going to get the bonus you thought. Maybe you are in situations, and what I think they're saying when they ask this question.
I kind of play these guys out just for the sake of it. But when I saw this channel, because again, it's a random encounter, which I think is going to be the title of this video, Random Encounters with Dashing, because it's very interesting that I don't know. Usually, I don't know. I guess to borrow like terminology these guys would use is the Zen Master. You will find the Zen Master when the Zen Master thinks you're ready, or the algorithm in this case thinks I'm ready. I'm gonna sub to these guys later on. I can't right now because I've been freaking Firefox, which is just a browser I use specifically. It's a 5-star day on the Digital Renegade podcast. God bless the goal. Yes, it is. It's amen. Absolutely. God, blessed be the Lord, man. Anyhow. So I'm going to keep looking into these guys, but other than that, I'm just going to end it here. Other than that, take care of one another, be careful with one another. Remember, saving the West is a side quest. This is the Digital Renegade podcast. Out.